Ah, spoiler alert!
The year is 2006. The Super Smash Bros. Series was commencing its third entry, going by the title of Super Smash Bros. Brawl. A cinematic trailer would be shown to the public following Nintendo's E3 press conference of that year. The trailer would show off the game's more realistic tone, and in addition, would showcase some new playable characters that players could expect to see. Out of the 5 newcomers announced to be included for this next installment, one of them stuck out like a sore thumb. I'm of course talking about Pit, the protagonist of the long-dormant Nintendo series, Kid Icarus. Supporting a completely new look, the return of the Flightless Angel would spark enormous discussion over whether or not Pit's roster inclusion meant that Kid Icarus would be revived. After all, it had been nearly 15 years since the series saw a new entry with Kid Icarus of Myths and Monsters released on the Game Boy in 1991. So, could this really mean that Nintendo was working to bring back this obscure franchise? Let's skip forward a bit to March of 2007, where a game studio known as Factor 5 would come into this story.
This is a straight hit and run mission. Good luck.
The studio, being well known for their work on the Star Wars Rogue Squadron games, were contracted by Nintendo to help bring new life into the world of Kid Icarus. The project would be made for the Nintendo Wii, as development of a prototype started immediately. Factor 5 would also begin to develop the game's setting and narrative. The tone would be drastically different and would serve as a darker reboot to its more cartoon-like predecessors. The story would kick off after the events of the original NES game, where Pit finds himself in a rough situation as he has been banished from Skyworld by Palutena after being accused of committing crimes against their realm. After years of now protecting the overworld, we see a more grown-up Pit, who has since learned how to fly on his own, when suddenly a new form of darkness reigns over the Earth. It is now up to Pit to defend this new realm in a redemption arc. Gameplay would have used the Wiimote's porting controls for aiming and shooting, while movement would be done via the nunchuck accessory, and would have utilized both air and land combat. The game would be in development for nearly a year before the project fell under, as Nintendo felt the change in tone was too distant from where they wanted the series to be, even sending the team a model of how they wanted Pit to look. However, Factor 5 wanted to stay true to their vision, which unfortunately led to the game's cancellation. Unseen 64's Liam Robertson got the chance to speak to Joe Spataro, a former Factor 5 animator, and had this to say on the matter. With Icarus, I feel like we are missing the point. Nintendo sent us a model of Kid Icarus, very much like the one that appears in Smash Bros, but we didn't use it. We made our own version, and it was more mature, maybe even a little dark. It felt more like Devil May Cry. I knew Nintendo would never go for the adult version of Pit. In fact, I'd wager they took it as an insult that we didn't use their vision. As the development of Factor 5's Icarus ceased, a very important question would come with the game's cancellation. Will the Kid Icarus series still get its revival? A question that would not take too long to answer. Not long after production wrapped up on Super Smash Bros. Brawl, series creator Masahiro Sakurai began brainstorming ideas for his next project. At the request of the late Nintendo president, Satoru Iwata, Sakurai was advised to create something new, as creating yet another Smash Bros. Game wouldn't be ideal. During this time, Nintendo was once again experimenting with stereoscopic 3D, and incorporating it with their up-and-coming system, the Nintendo 3DS. With the company's focus being directed towards the 3DS, Iwata's second request to Sakurai was that his project be made for the upcoming handheld as a launch title. And just like that, Sakurai got hard at work. With this new project, Sakurai strived to really test himself. Most of the games due to come out during the launch window were probably going to be ports. I could have chosen a genre that was easy to develop, but I doubted Iwata wanted something everyone's seen before, or something small, or something like Wii Party. In the end, I deliberately chose a difficult genre, something I wouldn't usually work with. After carefully considering his options, Sakurai landed on the shooter genre. His reasoning for this was simply due to a lack of the genre's popularity in the Japanese market compared to how it is overseas. The concept Sakurai came up with included two core gameplay factors: a cinematic on-rail shooter that would transition into a grounded third-person shooter. This concept would be officially referred to as air battles and land battles. After frequent visits to Nintendo, as well as interviews with potential studio members, Sakurai's project plan would be officially approved in October of 2008. At this point in conceptualization, the game was still an original IP, which concerned Sakurai, so he'd ask Mr. Iwata for input. During that first conversation with Iwata, I asked him whether I had to stick with the Nintendo franchise for this project. Working on Smash Bros., I knew all about how much love gamers had for all of Nintendo's games, and how frustrated they were that some of the series have lain dormant for so long. Any game designer wants to concentrate on original work, but given the role Nintendo had for me, I wanted to know if they had a particular brand they wanted to emphasize. Iwata's response: "If you think your project would be a good fit for one franchise or another, let's think about it then." Sakurai would look back into his project plan and skim through before slowly coming to a realization. When I presented my project to Nintendo, it was a wholly original game, but in the end, I suggested that we make it a Kid Icarus title instead. It'd have the goddess Palutena grant Pit the power of flight for 5 minutes at a time, and he'd fly into enemy strongholds and fight enemies on the ground afterwards. It sounded like a ton of fun, I thought, and I got the go-ahead pretty soon afterward. As soon as Sakurai was given the approval to use the world of Kid Icarus, it was time to create the narrative. The most important aspect to the game's story was how the plot would be incorporated with the gameplay. To Sakurai, this was very important due to having frustrations with how a lot of games would take the control away from the player just to introduce the plot. As a player, as someone who's been playing games for a long time, the stories that get told in video games are honestly irksome to me pretty often. For example, games that take forever to get through the intro and won't let you start playing, or games that go through the trouble of being fully voiced and wind up having their tempo all messed up as a result. I just want to enjoy the games, and I think I'm just intolerant of aspects that block that enjoyment. I can enjoy a story in any other form of media, I just want the game to let me play it already. In order to counter this way of storytelling, Sakurai's answer was to mesh the story together with gameplay, having characters interact with events that were taking place within the levels themselves. That meant to accomplish this feat successfully, he would have to write the game's script, and so he did. In addition, the game would need to establish a tone. At the time of its release, the original Kid Icarus was a lot less serious compared to other games that came out that year. Credit cards, wizards that turned players into eggplants. The protagonist was an angel who couldn't fly. It was Greek mythology flipped on its head. So, in order to keep the spirit of what made the original so unique, the game's tone would stay the same. A story that wouldn't take itself too seriously, that relied on comedic dialogue throughout the journey. Just 1 month later, in November of 2008, Masahiro Sakurai would rent out a small office space in the Takadanobaba district of Tokyo. It was at this building where Mr. Sakurai would establish the company Project Sora, and thus would officially begin the development of Kid Icarus Uprising.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Reggie Fils-Aimé.
We skip forward to a year and a half later. It is now E3 2010, and after months of renovations leading up to their press conference, Nintendo finally reveals their new handheld system to the public, the Nintendo 3DS. With the hardware being demoed on the show floor, Nintendo would have to showcase some upcoming games. It is here where Satoru Iwata would let the cat out of the bag, revealing what Project Sora had been working on as the handheld's big first-party title. With the game finally revealed to the public, Kid Icarus Uprising would begin to commence its big marketing push. News outlets all over the world would begin to cover the return of the Kid Icarus series, covering newly announced promotional art and features such as its interesting control scheme and Sakurai's experience with testing out online play. The next time we would see the game was on January 11th of the following year, taking place at Nintendo World 2011, a Japanese 3DS showcase held in the Makuhari Messa Convention Center, or, as some might recognize it, the home of the Tokyo Game Show, where Masahiro Sakurai himself would be in attendance to perform a live demonstration of the game. Before getting into the actual events and promotional items that advertise the game, I'd like to discuss AR cards. You see, during the 3DS era, Nintendo liked to experiment specifically with the 3DS's camera. One of the biggest features with the camera was the use of augmented reality. Aside from the built-in minigame Face Raiders, the Nintendo 3DS came packaged with a set of 6 AR cards that players could experiment with in the AR games application. The software was pretty much a model viewer where players could play a few minigames and take pictures with the character assigned cards. The reason for bringing this up was because Kid Icarus Uprising was one of the biggest games to utilize AR cards. A total of 412 cards were in the set, most of which could be found within booster packs sold at traditional retail stores. There were 2 waves of booster packs, Series 1 and Series 2. However, 52 cards were exclusive to outside of these packs. The first 20 could be found within copies of the game itself, where 6 randomly selected cards would come packaged with the cartridge. The 31 remaining will be discussed beyond this point and how they were obtained. Uprising's next showing took place at E3 2011. Similar to the year prior, the game would get another trailer during Nintendo's press conference. This trailer would showcase more gameplay but mostly focus on the game's multiplayer, ending it off with a tease of the AR card's functionality. On the show floor itself, E3 attendees would have the opportunity to go hands-on with Kid Icarus Uprising, as Nintendo's booth featured not just 1, but 3 different demos for the game, with each demo showcasing the game's single-player, multiplayer, and AR card battles. Wrapping up E3 2011, attendees could receive little promo items such as pins of Pit and prototype AR cards of Pit, Palutena, and Medusa that would be handed out by Nintendo employees. Every year, the city of Gashogawara, Japan, annually hosts the Tachinputa Summer Festival. These events were known for being one of the 4 largest festivals in the Sagara region. Tachinputa are massive 75-foot tall parade floats. There were 15 floats in total and would make their way across the city, accompanied with float carriers and dancers. Nintendo would collaborate with the festivities, as if you bought a ticket and were in attendance between August 4th and August 8th of 2011, you would get the chance to see this gorgeous float of Pit and Palutena to honor the game. In addition, people who registered through the official website could submit their Mii that would appear in a collage at the bottom of the float. During the event itself, you could obtain AR card number 412, the Kid Icarus float, being distributed at the Panasonic Center in Tokyo, Japan. Over the months, murmurs of a potential delay would loom over the project. As discussed originally, Kid Icarus Uprising was planned to launch with the 3DS. However, as the project grew more ambitious, the game was pushed out of the 3DS's launch window. Officially, the game had no set release date, yet this still stirred discussions about whether or not the game would be finished and released before the end of 2011. As most of you are now aware, these suspicions were correct, as it was revealed in a September 3DS conference that Kid Icarus Uprising would be delayed to March of 2012. Although the delay was seen as a disappointment to many, it did not stop Nintendo from continuing the game's big marketing push. September would bring the announcement of 3 new animated projects being made to promote Kid Icarus Uprising. These shorts would be produced by well-known animation studios including Studio 4C, Shaft, and Production IG. Releasing within the time frame of the game's release, Thanatos Rising, Palutena's Revolting Dinner, and Medusa's Revenge would make their way onto Nintendo Video, a live service that sent trailers, shorts, and skits straight to the 3DS system. As the game's release was on the horizon, in March of 2012, Nintendo, in collaboration with select GameStop stores across the United States, would host the Kid Icarus Uprising multiplayer tournament, a nationwide tournament where players across the country would compete in the game's multiplayer mode, with the winners of each location getting the opportunity to compete in the championships held in New York. At said championship location, players could expect to see 3DS stations with the game ready to be played, as well as a Kid Icarus themed food truck parked outside the store, where Greek-style food would be served. The winner of the championships would be Samuel Busby, more commonly recognized as the Buzz, a soon-to-be top-level competitor in the Super Smash Bros. Competitive scene. The day is finally upon us. It is March 23rd, 2012, the North American release date of Kid Icarus Uprising. Nintendo World New York would celebrate the launch by decorating the store with Kid Icarus themed decorations. Some exclusive promotional items included a couple of shirts and sweatshirts themed around the game, as well as AR card number 25, the 3 Sacred Treasures, which were only given out to the first 250 customers to pick up a copy of the game. Now that the game was finally released, let me go over a quick lightning round covering some more promotional items and events that were either made sometime before or after the game's launch. On January 10th, 2012, Nintendo would dedicate its newest magazine issue of Nintendo Power, number 275, to showcase an exclusive preview of Kid Icarus Uprising. The very next month, the Nintendo 3DS's Street Pass Me Plaza would feature a Kid Icarus Uprising themed puzzle that would be added to Puzzle Swap in February 2012, showcasing a looping animation of Pit battling a Mono-Eye. On March 12, 2012, Nintendo would team up with Takara Tomy to produce Kid Icarus Uprising themed Choco Snacks, a Japanese chocolate treat that came packaged with a randomly selected group of the game's AR cards. The magazines Korokoro Comics and V-Jump would release manga shorts themed around the game's events in April of 2012. The name of these titles were Kid Icarus Uprising, Heads of Draw, and The New Myth of Light, Kid Icarus, The Mirror of Pathena. Nintendo's partnership with GameStop would not just end with the multiplayer tournament, as on April 12, 2012, the store would hold an event where players could receive AR cards exclusive to the event. AR cards number 3, The Fiend's Cauldron, number 142, The Skyscraper Club, number 156, The Fireworks Cannon, number 221, The Minos, and finally, number 230, The Eggplant Wizard would all be distributed. Nintendo's reward program, Club Nintendo, would produce a pack of 3 AR cards that included number 13, The Great Reaper, number 180, The Drill Arm, and number 404, Palutena Rare. On March 22, 2012, Club Nintendo would also produce a limited selection soundtrack of the game for Japanese members only. However, a full 3-disc soundtrack would be released by Sleigh Bells and Procyon Studio on August 21, 2012, containing the full song list. And if you purchased the first edition version, marked by a gold sticker, you would receive AR cards number 375, The Daybreak, as well as the exclusive number 408, Pit Revived. Finally, in April of 2013, the toy company Good Smile and Max Factory would release Figma figures of Pit and Dark Pit. These figures come with a plethora of accessories including weapons, stands, a Mono-Eye companion figure, and a separate facial accessory for their respective character. All around, these figures are lovely and come with many forms of articulation, perfect for recreating some of the game's iconic scenes and poses. In addition, for those who were lucky enough to purchase the first editions of these figures, you would receive AR cards number 410, Pit Injured, number 188, The Mono-Eye, number 407, Dark Pit Flying, and 409, Magnus and Gao. As for any game that gets released, changes are bound to be made during its development period, and Kid Icarus Uprising is no exception. Although there isn't too much to say, I'd still like to cover some of the game's notable changes that were left on the cutting room floor. There will be some things I won't mention or skip past, like confirming the game's graphical quality wasn't as polished for obvious reasons. However, I will go over many of the game's differences. First off, I'd like to discuss the Kid Icarus Uprising prototypes, as yes, there's in fact footage of what the game looked like in early development, revealed in an Iwata Asks interview with the game's director, Masahiro Sakurai. During the early stages of production, there was no development kit made for the 3DS at the time, so, without a proper dev kit, Sakurai would start putting together prototypes using the Nintendo Wii and a PC. The footage you're seeing now is this exact prototype, and was created as an example to show new members who were joining the development team. During our history segment, I mentioned that the game was delayed into 2012. The reason for that was because of this Wii/PC build. as the development team would get a good chunk of the game functioning on said hardware before having to be ported onto the 3DS. Because of this, the team would spend a long period of time porting the game over while also needing the game to run smoothly. As for the prototype itself, many changes can be compared to the final product. The footage takes place during the game's opening chapter. There's a sheer lack of enemies, I assume being the case for testing reasons. Medusa's design looked completely different, and Pit lacked his signature gallop when walking. All around, this is a pretty important piece of the game's history, so I'm glad footage of it is available to the public. Let's move over to the E3 2010 reveal, where some big changes can be seen within the trailer. First and foremost, let's talk about the voice acting, as both Pit and Palutena are voiced by different actors than the retail game. From what is publicly known, Palutena's voice actor was never revealed. However, we do know Pit was voiced by Troy Lund. We can also make out that the reticle made for aiming at enemies was very simplified compared to the one seen in the final. Many artistic changes were made throughout the game's development as well, like the logo, which is a lot more simplistic compared to how we all know it to be. This logo would be used for over a year and could be seen in promotional images as well as prototype AR cards that would be handed out at early events. Character designs also had slight changes throughout development. Most of these design changes were minor, like the Mega Muscle enemy who originally had 9 pearls that the player shot at instead of the usual 3. However, one enemy in particular was changed due to being censored. The Siren enemy, based on the creature found in Greek mythology, was censored due to its depiction of showing human breasts. The original NES game would feature this design, however, during the transition to Uprising, the Siren would be depicted wearing clothing in the final game. As a staple of Masahiro Sakurai's dedication for making games, he'd often take many screenshots during development, posting them alongside a game's announcement, and would continue posting new shots even after a game's release. And Kid Icarus Uprising was no exception. All of the screenshots being shown were pictured alongside the time frames they were captured, and helped give an idea of how development progressed. For example, from February of 2010 all the way up until November of 2011, Sakurai would use the aforementioned PC build of the game, while all screenshots onward would be captured through a 3DS development kit. I could go on and on about the little details seen from every individual screenshot, but we'd be here forever. I feel like I covered as much as I possibly could without going into the game itself, something that I will be doing soon enough. Today is March 23rd, 2023, the 11th anniversary of the game's release, and without spoiling too much, consider this a multiple-parter, as this isn't the last time I'll be covering this game. So, I hope this was a proper introduction, but until then, stay tuned for the future parts. This is Steel, signing out.